Dan Hooker, you're not wrong. I think it's a silly fight. He's
Yeah.
going to wipe the floor with him. I think stylistically, I'm not being a dick. I said before this, everyone was saying, "Oh, Paulo Costa is really mean. He's really He hits really hard, and he's got big muscles." It's the same shit, bro. He's just like a muscle-bound striker. Let's be real about the situation. Does he have takedowns? Not really. Does he have good submissions? A scrambling wrestling game? No, he doesn't. He's got to stand. He's a muscle-bound striker. Show me a muscle-bound striker that's ever done good against Israel. You're not wrong, Dan Hooker.
Yeah.
You're not wrong.
It doesn't really take a genius to read this matchup, I don't think. Hello, one and all, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie. Phil, how's it going?
Going pretty good. We're in the middle of this, I guess getting towards the end of this run of insane quality combat sports.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of building up to its natural climax, which is obviously Israel Adesanya against Jared Cannonier.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well,
It's been just coming together. You know, we've had insane high quality striking with Takeru and Tenshin. We've had incredible grappling with Tsarukian and Gamrot, and we've had massive wars. And yeah, it's just all gonna come together just right at the pinnacle of combat sports. A Jared Cannonier main event.
I gotta be honest, the following week's UFC card, also not bad. It's totally fine fight night card.
Shocking. They're keeping it up shockingly well. Not gonna lie.
Good main event, couple of interesting bookings, and then a lot of bookings that mean nothing but will almost certainly be fun. So I really cannot complain about this whole month straight, essentially, of UFC cards. And this one's no exception. I mean, really, from top to bottom, this is a solid card. In fact, I didn't even notice until just now. Ian Gary is fighting Gabriel Green, which I think is a really interesting and very difficult test for the UFC's next Irish hopeful. But yeah, the top of this card, it's UFC 276. Have I even said it yet? Is, as Phil mentioned, Israel Adesanya versus Jared Cannonier. In the co-main event, Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway 3. And then we've got Sean Strickland versus Alex Pereira. Pretty obvious what they're trying to do there. And Pedro Munoz versus Sean O'Malley. Robbie Lawler versus Brian Barberena makes me feel strangely empty inside. But this really cannot complain about this main card, and it doesn't stop there. I am going to fly in the face of centuries of UFC booking convention here, Phil.
No.
And suggest that we talk about Volkanovski Holloway 3 first.
You rebel.
I know. To me, it is it's a little insane that the UFC would be so stridently follow the bigger championship fight gets the main event. And I mean bigger just physically in this case. Because Volkanovski Holloway 3, it's like the stars have aligned to even make this fight possible. That nothing has gotten in the way, that we've gotten two incredible fights out of these two incredible fighters, and that we still get the chance to see this is an epic conclusion to a trilogy. Even if it sucks, it will still hold my interest, rapt attention all 25 minutes. It's that compelling of a fight. And the fact that it's relegated to co-main event status because the dudes weigh under 150 pounds on the scale is pretty bananas to me. I have to be honest. I don't.
I mean, it isn't just that. It's, I think, who the UFC expects to win. If the UFC expected Max Holloway to win, I would think that they might be more likely to put it in the main event. But
you think so?
I think it's just a question of like star power between Adesanya and Volkanovski. As much as we love Alexander Volkanovski.
Yeah, but who gives a shit about Adesanya Cannonier? I mean, I give a shit to the extent that these are great fighters. It's interesting. I don't really mean who gives a shit, but I don't give that much of a shit. It's just another title fight. That's the narrative going into it. It's another title fight. Big whoop.
It's a title fight where they're fairly sure that the star side of the equation is going to win.
Yeah.
And where they've got a good chance of like lining him up against either like a historic rival with massive knockout power or just a loony in Sean Strickland.
Well,
afterwards. So
I guess.
No, I mean I can see it. I can see it beyond the size thing. But yeah, the size thing is also clearly doing its work as well.
Dana White's
and that is also, I will mention, one of the things that's making this like run of events so good is the relative dearth of like heavyweight and light heavyweight.
Yes, there's no one noticed.
Positions.
There's no one noticed how good all these main events have been, and none of them are heavyweights. Literally, the last shitty card we had was Volkov Rosenstrike, a heavyweight main event. Well, whatever their reasoning, and however sensible idiots might think it is, in the words of Max Holloway, c'est la vie. Isn't that always what Max says?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to talk about that one first.
That's the way the cookie crumbles.
That's
he
it.
Famously says.
That's it. That's the way the poi gloops. Poi doesn't really crumble, does it?
Losing me here.
That's what they eat in Hawaii, Phil. They eat poi. It looks like wallpaper paste. I'm sure it's delicious. Okay, Volkanovski, Holloway 3. That is the top of the bill on our schedule at the very least. And yeah, let's get into it. What are your sort of general feelings now, having seen these guys meet twice? I mean, I say we've had two incredible fights. The first fight was really just incredible in that it was Volkanovski more or less shutting out one of the most unshut-outable fighters we've ever seen. It wasn't even really a fight where you're going to rewatch it and be blown away by the action, but that in and of itself was incredibly impressive. And then the second fight, despite all our expectations, Max Holloway was sharp, was well prepared, and adjusted his style in ways that we had never really seen before, and was itself a really, really great tactical war kind of fight. What are your feelings about this trilogy? Anything changed? Any expectations?
I mean, they kind of have from my perspective, in that we were kind of defenders of the idea that Volkanovski could have actually won the second fight, because there was a lot of people who I think, I felt like they were being sentimentally driven a bit after that second fight, because everyone expected Holloway was going to look like shit. He wasn't sounding great. He said he hadn't been sparring. Was it short notice?
Maybe, but I know he hadn't been sparring. There was a bunch of COVID shit, and he'd had to withdraw from a fight shortly before that, and
And then he comes out and kind of hurts Volkanovski in the first two rounds. And then, at least on the judges' scorecard, loses the next three. And I felt like people were being a bit like generous with the robbery calls. And I thought that Volkanovski might have actually won that fight. On rewatch, I am less sure that Volkanovski won that fight.
It's an incredibly close fight.
You might have said that as well.
It's an incredibly close fight, yeah. I mean, I just rewatched it for the, who knows how many time.
I forget just that I'd forgotten that like Volkanovski just keeps eating like quite hard, clean shots throughout the whole.
Yeah, that's the thing. There is a clear momentum shift, and Volkanovski stops getting dropped.
He still gets pretty badly buzzed in the fourth round.
Yeah. In the third and fourth rounds, I think you could argue Holloway lands the best shot in both of those rounds.
Yeah.
Just as he had in the previous two. It's just that Volkanovski has started to land many more clean shots of his own. Yeah, it's incredibly close. And it is still, I mean, I can understand fully, even without the sentimentality, which I share, who doesn't love Max Holloway, why people were upset, because how many times have we said in just relatively recent memory that you probably lean in the direction of the guy who gets the clear rounds? And there's no question Max Holloway had 2 clear rounds in that fight.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically 2 very clear Max rounds, 2 real toss-ups, and then 1 somewhat clear Volkanovski round.
Yeah.
Statistically, you would have expected. But again, as we found out again last week, it's only a rule of thumb. It's not necessarily, hard and fast.
Yeah, who fucking knows?
Sarukian found out against Gamrot.
Yeah.
It's still possible that it goes against you. So, what is there to kind of say about the 2 fights that we haven't really said already? I mean, I think it's really a question. The first one was just a question of Volkanovski taking away Holloway's jab with his own low kicks and jabs and counterpunching. And the second one was really Holloway forcing Volkanovski backwards with nothing but feints and refusing to lead. And when he did lead, taking a much more kind of Jackson Wink style approach to the fight, and that he was just
do that.
he
don't
would
say that.
Sorry, what's that?
Don't say that to me. I don't like that.
I have to say it.
All right, go on.
In that, rather than building off the jab as he normally does, he was often like just doing things that he didn't think Volkanovski was going to be ready for.
Mm-hmm.
He had rather than just starting off from the jab and building out from that, it was a much more diverse attack right from the outset. But I think more than that, that really helped him because it allowed him to kind of punish Volkanovski from a distance. Mm-hmm. But more than that, it was the upright stance and the feinting which controlled the directionality of the fight. I think that's one of the major differences in between those first 2 rounds and the last 3, is that Volkanovski spends so much of the first 2 rounds just skirting the fence.
Yep.
Just waiting for the jab so that he can counter it. And then he suddenly just starts to realize, I can't do this.
Yep.
He's just picking me off, and I don't know what's coming.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy that it is one of, if not the most high-level fight we've ever seen. And even that, you can sort of reduce it to guy who comes forward wins. The classic rule that almost always applies. It's not quite that simple. I mean, not close to that simple. There's a ton of nuance to what's going on. I mean, it's an interesting fight in that the guy who comes forward starts winning by making his opponent throw first a lot of the time.
Yes.
That was Holloway's strategy, as you said, that he sort of he keyed in on how able Volkanovski was to counter the jabs and take them away, and he used Volkanovski's expectation that he was looking to counter the jabs to then draw those shots out of him and re-counter. Most spectacularly with the right uppercut that he sort of unveiled, a shot that he's really rarely thrown before. And clearly just drilled the hell out of that particular response to Volkanovski's jab, or to Volkanovski entering in any way, really, sort of expecting him to come in behind something, duck, and then proceed to follow up. Uppercut was perfectly timed on a couple of occasions, and the knees. And then when Volkanovski realized he needed to lead, he led with feints more than anything. He decided to just sort of out-trick Holloway and push him back with the suggestion of offense, which then opened up more options for him. Yeah, I do want to talk a little bit. I mean, I don't think we have to worry too much about rehashing anything we've said. I mean, for one, I can't remember what we've said already and what we haven't. But it was quite a while ago, and I think it's really worth looking at that second fight once again in detail to kind of figure out what might happen here. As much of a toss-up as it may still be, I do think Volkanovski's adjustments, little tactical adjustments, are really, really interesting in how he got into that fight. And I think that still stands to be an advantage over Holloway, because we saw Max come in with a different approach, But the trouble with that was, at a certain point, there was kind of nowhere to go. You know what I mean? It sort of has the feeling of him running out of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Despite the fact that I think you can easily still make a case for him winning that fight. Holloway is not a guy you ever expect to run out of ideas, normally because he has pretty much one idea and builds and builds and builds. So it resulted, him coming up with this really clever adjustment resulted in him fighting more of a Volkanovski kind of fight, where it just came down to who can better navigate these sort of tactical skirmishes that we're just continually having with each other. Yeah. One thing Volkanovski did really well was, first of all, using his own jab.
I was going to say, I think that's really one of the key differences between the sort of middle to late fight and the beginning.
That if this guy's just going to stay on me with feints at distance, why don't I use my own jab like a jab? Use it to create angles, use it to just sort of crack things open a little bit, create openings for other things. What came very soon after he started finding the jab was the left hook, which he was looking for as a big counter swing early on and got punished for it several times. Once he started hooking off the jab, which is a particular technique that Volkanovski does really well, that I think it's easy for a lot of people. I think it's not just you throw a jab and then you throw a left hook. There's a sneakiness of timing to me that determines, he's hooking off the jab. That to me is like a discrete technique in and of itself, where the hand comes out and it's like a half beat kind of thing. A broken rhythm kind of thing is intrinsic to how this works. The hand comes out, you step in, you've now loaded the foot the hook comes off of, and closed the distance just enough to be in range for that shot. And ideally the opponent has dropped their hand or reached out to parry your jab, and then the hook wraps around. But Volkanovski also did this to the body really well as the fight went on. That left hook to the body, he only lands a few of them, but every single one is hard and clean, and it's a really, really good entry coming off of that jab. And then I think the final adjustment tactically that Volkanovski made, and all of this, of course, fits into the context, the bigger picture of him pushing forward more and creating more engagements with jabs and feints, is he started to find his own right hand. Mm-hmm. And this was a real difficulty early on because he just wasn't comfortable getting his head into that sort of slot, putting his head over his lead leg. But he discovered, as the fight wore on, that was actually a very safe place for his head to be. It evaded the uppercut. It evaded Holloway's right hand, that he could, in fact, create an exchange and then just continue it, just throwing the right hand and making sure he was moving his head as he threw it, and he was still going to be like the faster, harder-hitting guy in that range, that it was in fact safe to just start extending the combinations. These I think were like the critical tactical adjustments that Volkanovski made. That allowed, I think,
particularly because in the longer exchanges, Holloway was tending, as much as he was starting out with this kind of higher base, to allow him to counter the low kicks and take advantage of his height and so on. And Holloway really just tended to widen his base in exchanges and stand there. Mm-hmm. Which meant that I think, and Volkanovski is just more likely to. Volkanovski would only adjust his feet like once during exchanges, but it often meant that in those situations he was just standing off to the he was more likely to be standing off on Holloway's center line, as Holloway kind of had to basically drag his feet back into the position, just like very, very broad and kind of often out of position. Mm-hmm. I think, it was partially just, Holloway just getting tired. He wasn't fighting mentally tired. He wasn't fighting his own. He wasn't fighting the classic kind of fight that he wants.
Yeah, not physically. I mean, I don't think the pace was close to enough to physically tire Holloway out. But yeah, it's mental fatigue, which time and again is Volkanovski's biggest advantage over all of his opponents. That he can just. I mean, I don't know. There's oh God, am I going to do it, Phil? Am I going to mention chess?
Yeah, do it.
Okay, I will. There's a thing you do in chess when you're in a losing position, right? You can continue to make safe, principled moves, and you will more often than not just safely lose. You know, you'll just sort of steadily lose as long as your opponent doesn't make any egregious errors. Now, some people might say you stay in long enough, you just wait for them to make an error. But that doesn't seem like a very wise way to go with a fighter like Max Holloway. The other thing you can do to encourage errors is to maybe play a little riskier, but to seek complication. To just continually try to complicate the position. And Volkanovski's huge advantage in fights like this is he is a master of complications. I can't think of another fighter who stays more poised, who's more ready to continue adjusting to these incredibly tense, like in-the-pocket exchanges and series of engagements that all maybe come off the same feint or come off the same entry, but branch out in all these different ways and just continually press this kind of fight where you just have to problem solve faster than Volkanovski. Under pressure, under stress. Nobody else does that like him. And I really think, impressive as it was, and possibly winning as it was, that was Holloway's problem in that performance, is he got himself into a kind of fight where he had a couple of really great ideas, and it turned out that, like any idea, there were solutions. There were answers. And then there were more problems and more complications coming on, and suddenly he's 4 rounds into a fight that's... It's not really like there's not a natural progression for him from there. It doesn't lead into a Max Holloway kind of fight that, like I said, it has the feeling of maybe he wins, but at a certain point he clearly runs out of ideas. So it's this weird thing where Holloway has the clearest rounds, but the momentum shift is undeniable. That the fight just gets better and better for Volkanovski the longer it goes on. So, any ideas of how that might change coming into this Trilogy meeting?
So
tough to predict because I did not we did not expect Holloway to have the adjustments he did have for the second fight.
Yeah, and you know, what do you take away from like their both of their recent performances?
Yeah,
I mean, because the thing is that you could say that Volkanovski was expected to kind of slaughter Korean Zombie, but on the one hand, you know, he wasn't really expected to slaughter Korean Zombie that badly.
Oh my God.
And also, Holloway kind of struggled mightily with Rodriguez, who he was also supposed to beat pretty handily.
Yeah.
So, but on the other hand, he also showed a few more wrinkles to his game. You know, notably, obviously, his own takedowns, which, again, I'm not sure if he can take down and work a top position game on Alexander Volkanovski. But anything that discourages anything that discourages low kicks is probably not a bad idea.
Sure.
I mean, it was interesting that up until that 5th round, Volkanovski's own takedown attempts did not so much serve to like actually get him any damage or control time, but they did kind of reverse the positionality of the fight, and he was just able to push Holloway up against the fence. Yeah,
and it ended up being, I mean, the first clinch exchange of the fight is actually Holloway really just gets the better of it. He stuffs the takedown, and then he's first on the break. It's funny, actually, there's like a little corner cam of Volkanovski's corner being like, okay, on the disengagement, Alex, and then Alex gets hit on the break.
Yeah.
But he yet another thing that he picked up on as the fight went on, that he could go for takedowns and then just be willing to accept that it's not going to happen and be the one to stop fighting for the position first so he can get the shots in on the break. There's a couple of those.
Yeah, I mean, so he's got that weight shift that he does moving forward was where it's either, you know, a low kick from one of his two legs or a left hand or a jab or a hook or maybe, you know, a right hand. It leads to so many things for him, but he only really started using it as a level change late in the fight.
Mm-hmm.
I am curious. I mean, this is one of the things. How much do we talk of these fights in terms of things they could do as opposed to things they will do?
Yeah.
It would serve. It seems like it would. Again, another thing we harp on a lot. It would serve Volkanovski a lot just to lead to the body.
Absolutely.
I mean, if Volkanovski just had, I don't think he needs. You know, he doesn't need to use like a big sweeping hook to the. Just a jab or a right straight to the body.
Body
from
jabs,
that
right
step
straight.
in.
That same like safe head slot I talked about with the right hand, of just slipping his head to the left as he throws. Do that with a straight right to the sternum.
Yep.
Easier to land, creates a point of contact, safe attritive damage. Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I think,
you know, and the same thing goes for Holloway. You know, one of MMA's most prolific body punchers.
yeah,
When he's, it's been almost totally absent in both his fights with Volkanovski. All of his body work has come from kicks.
yeah. Which some of that I think is just the builds of the fighters.
Mm-hmm.
The body just, I mean, I was going to say it doesn't feel as accessible. It literally just isn't as accessible. There's a lot less body on Volkanovski, a lot less belly to aim for.
Yep, he is largely head.
Yeah. But one particular shot that we saw a tremendously effective example of, yet again, from a fighter who does this all the time last weekend, Chris Curtis loves that uppercut to the body.
Mm-hmm.
You know the uppercut's a good shot. You know the opening is there. Yes, you have to be wary of the left hook. But the right uppercut to the body is a great weapon for a taller guy against a shorter guy. You're going to exploit all the same positional openings of a regular uppercut with just a much larger target. That's harder to miss. And I think is honestly a relatively safe, because this is another one where you can largely negate the idea of a left hook counter. Everyone worries, you're dropping your right hand, et cetera, et cetera. If you throw that uppercut the way Volkanovski started throwing his right hand, if you get your head off to the side and then you can get to an angle right after you land, I think actually leading with body shots is actually, I think, a lot safer than people imagine.
It was another interesting thing. Like in the Rodriguez fight, Holloway started off just leading with jabs to the body.
Yeah.
Admittedly, he almost immediately gave it up because he was just like, we're in a mad brawl now.
Yeah. I can hit him with whatever I want, and he's hitting me back.
Yeah.
This
but
is fun.
actually, he worked Rodriguez's body just like much more than he did versus Holloway, and versus Volkanovski, and often by changing his own level.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think for both of them, just more body work, stop headhunting. Holloway, I think it's not worth. It's probably worth him at least attacking that. Was it a knee tap that he was throwing? I mean, they both interestingly enough, they both sort of went for the same takedowns when Holloway went for them against Rodriguez and Volkanovski went for them against Holloway.
Yeah.
They both just really had this very telegraphed, right hand up, left hand down, knee tap kind of entry. He should do that, I think, especially early. See if he can discourage the low kicks, but also because he can win clinch exchanges.
Yeah.
And Volkanovski obviously needs to get his jab working and be first.
Yep.
The risk for Volkanovski in this is obviously that not only is he the champion and the defending fighter and the one who's won 2 fights, and so he's going to be psychologically less predisposed to that, but he's obviously, and assuming that Holloway hasn't taken, that Holloway's chin hasn't finally cracked, Volkanovski obviously has a durability disadvantage.
Yeah. Not like
if he starts exchanges from the start of the fight, he may just be hurt.
Could be, yeah. I don't think it's a dramatic difference. I mean, Volkanovski is clearly incredibly durable and has also always an aid to durability. Tremendous conditioning.
Yes, and and that he just doesn't panic when he's hurt at all,
exactly.
Or ever.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the conditioning too. Again, he can fight at such a high level, such a high pace, whether it's sheer output of punches or just constant presence of danger, inviting risk without tensing up and getting tired. And the same applies to getting dropped. I mean, they really are, as much as they are round-winning strikes, they are truly flash knockdowns in Volkanovski Holloway too. Mm-hmm. Like, he's not really hurt that bad. He goes down, he pops right back up and is fine.
Yep.
So yeah, that's a possibility, but I don't think he has to invite a ton of exchanges. Again, I think once he started finding his own jab, things just started going much better for him. That he can, that's the way that you don't even have to be pressing forward the whole time. You can use that jab to adjust your position and force Max to reset. And you're Volkanovski, you're perfectly happy to just continually reset and have the same stalemate position again and again and again. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm so ready to like be surprised by a couple novel adjustments from each of these guys. Mm-hmm. But we know that Volkanovski can shut down Holloway Classic, and we know that he can out-adjust Holloway 2.0. And I think we could be in for a very similar arc to this fight, unless Volkanovski just comes in determined, which I think he really may do, to just put his stamp on it right away. As he did against Korean Zombie. We have to say, like, it's not just, oh, no one expected him to strong like that. That was one of the best pure boxing performances I've ever seen in MMA. Mm-hmm. Just the way that he created engagements with his jab, all the different ways that he knew exactly how to follow up, given different responses, like pure fundamentals at a super, super high level. Great boxing. So I'm going to have to pick Volkanovski to win for a third time.
I think I'm going to pick Holloway. Mm-hmm. It's probably the wrong move to make. You know, when someone's starting to show cracks, you should never really, like overlook it that much. You know, I find myself wondering about things like that Rodriguez fight. You know, how much is that one of those performances like Poirier Hooker, where it's just like an action fighter just really, putting forward his best possible performance and still, coming significantly up short.
Very clearly losing, but just the willingness to have a mess was really, I think, what kept Rodriguez so alive in that fight.
Yeah, and just slamming in full power body kicks with no, like, not necessarily no worry for what was coming back at him, but just, expending his athleticism in just massive splurges. Yeah. And then just running away when it didn't work.
The defense on display in that fight.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Just like looking back on the fight, it's their second fight. It was just how many times Volkanovski got hurt.
Sure.
Whether it was flash knockdowns or just getting buzzed. It was more than I remembered it being. Mm-hmm. Because I remembered those two flash knockdowns, but I didn't remember other times when I was like, oh my god, he's visibly buzzed.
Yep. Round 4, he gets visibly hurt. Round 3, he eats just a huge 1-2 that, like I said, is almost certainly the best pair of shots in the entire round, even if I think he probably still loses the round on volume. It's like, yeah.
It is notable. Volkanovski has been looking more like a puncher as well against both Ortega and Korean Zombie. Admittedly, people, that it's not that hard to look like a puncher against, because they're going to allow you to hit them very cleanly.
Yeah.
So there's, just significant chances he can just back Holloway out of exchanges now in a way that like Dustin Poirier could. He can just chase him back down.
Sure.
Rather than having neutral exchanges and just back him into the fence now. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll take Holloway just for the. I think basically just for the durability edge.
Sure.
I think he can. I think we're probably in for another close one. I kind of hope we're in for another close one. It would be great if we got another 5 rounds out of this.
Oh, I'll be shocked if it isn't close. These two are just made to fight each other. It's like, yeah, I'm so fucking excited for this fight. The people's main event, truly. How many times do we say that as just an incredibly easy gag? But no, this is I won't anticipate another fight this much all year.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and the other thing I was thinking about was kind of Whittaker Adesanya too, because that was another one where people had some worries about Whittaker going into it, but he really kind of synthesized the things that he'd been working on in the run up to that fight. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't think that the things that Holloway is we saw him going for in the Holloway fight. I think they're good ideas.
Brilliant.
He's going back to his body shots more, leading with body shots, ending combinations with them, and trying for his own takedowns, initiating clinches on his own terms,
and bringing his kicks back into his game. There's been a lot more Holloway the kicker lately, which was obviously effective against Volkanovski too. I especially love the Holloway spinning back kick. He maybe throws that strike better than anyone else, and he used to do it all the time when he was a young fighter, and now it's coming back as a really useful weapon to kind of just sprinkle into his pressuring style.
Yep. Yeah, it was one of his primary ways to kind of hate someone moving away from his left hand.
Yep.
When they were near the cage. So yeah, I mean, I think we're going to end up with something maybe a bit like Adesanya Whittaker 2. But I think in this case, it's just that I think this time the challenger is the one with the size and durability edge. Mm-hmm. But yeah, very excited to watch it.
It will be, I mean, I love Volkanovski. He is like the fighter of my dreams. He's like a new Jose Aldo, where like, he's like a bullshit cheater athlete, but also he's just so fucking good that I can't even be mad. But I would love to see Holloway win purely because I want to see a fourth fight. And we'd have to get it. I mean, it's one clear win, one contentious split, and then Holloway getting a clear win. How do you not run it back again?
Also, if Volkanovski wins, I can produce my 10 reasons why Volkanovski is pound for pound number 1 listicle.
Oh, yeah. God, we've been looking forward to that for years. All right. Well, there's the real main event. Let's take a break. When we come back, the technically real main event? I don't know. Adesanya, Cannonier. We've also got Sean Strickland, Alex Pereira, Pedro Munoz, Sean O'Malley. There's other good fights besides, but I think those are probably the ones that we will get to on this episode. All of that after this. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Israel Adesanya. Jared Cannonier, Phil, take it away.
I mean, Jared Cannonier already knocked out the first Anderson Silva, and now he's here to do the same to the next one.
All right, that's it. We'll be back after this short break when we are going to discuss, what was it? Sean Strickland versus Alex Pereira and Pedro Munoz versus Sean O'Malley. Right back after this.
Sweet. That was easy.
Jesus, this job is a piece of cake. It's not over.
Like,
you have something to say.
Yeah, Jared Cannonier is a weird guy to call the fights for, because he is just immensely physically dependent.
Yeah.
In a way, which I would suggest that in some ways, like, even like Paulo Costa isn't.
Oh yeah, Paulo Costa has a pretty functional, like, logical game.
Mm-hmm. Whereas Cannonier is really just, so many of his fights as people simply bouncing off the physical wall that is Jared Cannonier.
Yeah.
And as such, obviously, one of the main things people should look for would be, like, that Jared Cannonier Paulo Costa fight that needs to happen at some point.
Mm-hmm.
The ghost of Patrick Wyman weeps that it hasn't, to be honest.
Oh my god. Are you kidding me?
But other than that, like, he's kind of clunky, defensively not great, but he's just immensely physically strong.
Mm-hmm.
And just breaks, and mentally strong as well. He just breaks people.
Yeah. And he's got a huge lump of Lemurian quartz in his cup.
Yeah.
That's the real secret to his physicality. He's got the astrophyllite, one of the most powerful crystals known to man. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the thing is Jared Cannonier he lacks... Paulo Costa channeled his athleticism into a sort of like hard-nosed, not athletic guy's game in some respects.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, what if I was not a muscle-bound freak, but I was still very durable and I hated all of my opponents? How would I fight? And that's what he does. It's a real sort of logical slugger style. What Cannonier lacks in terms of clear process, he does make up for somewhat by being a kind of a tricky adjuster. He's a cleverer fighter than you think, but in like a really dumb athlete kind of way. Where like he kind of has to just figure out what does and doesn't work by just being in an aimless fight. But you know, the Kelvin Gastelum bout, a pretty clever showing there from Cannonier. Likewise against Derek Brunson, I think he actually does tend to adjust pretty well, as long as the opponent isn't just like way technically better, like Robert Whittaker was. You know,
which is the damning problem with this particular fight.
Yes, that is the difficulty here, is that Cannonier will stumble into adjustments against opponents who regularly stumble. And what is his way in against a presumably just sort of airtight, distance maintaining, engagement limiting Israel Adesanya?
Yeah, so that's another one of the things I think we probably need to hit. Another reason why perhaps they might not have wanted to put this one in the headliner. There's a non-zero chance that this one's going to suck.
Oh yeah, yeah. Somebody replied on Twitter when I was complaining about this booking order. They're like, they probably expect this one to be more likely to have a finish. I'm like, do they? Because that seems unwise.
Jared Cannonier is disgustingly tough.
Yep, has yet to be finished, especially at a middleweight anyway. And we know how Adesanya can be when he's in there against a guy who has no way to get to him easily, but if he does get to him, would probably hurt him very badly.
Yeah,
and that is namely cautious, to choose a flattering word. He can be a very cautious fighter against this kind of opponent.
And it's just the fact that, like, yeah, Cannonier's main ranged weapon is a very MMA one. He's just like, I'm going to slam in raw low kicks.
Yeah.
And if you try and counter them, we're going to be stuck in exchanges, and I'm more powerful and more durable than you are.
Yeah.
That's really sort of the logic of his game as a striker. It's one which has carried him through an sort of aging middleweight division. But is he going to raw low kick, is he?
Yeah.
I just don't think he is. And then when that doesn't work, what is he going to do?
Yeah.
I suspect he might just wait for counter opportunities.
Yeah.
And so I think, honestly, I think Adesanya will be quite content with just picking him off with jabs as Cannonier steps forward. Like Whittaker did this a bunch of times.
Mm-hmm.
Just use that little sort of stepping up jab to interrupt Cannonier as he stepped in. Adesanya will low kick him, and then Adesanya will get out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like there's no reason for that not to be an entire fight. And I don't know if the other side of Cannonier being, a clever fighter is that I think he's confident in his ability to adjust. Some perhaps, sort of unreasonably so.
Mm-hmm.
He was more aggressive late in that fight with Whittaker when he was losing it. But he wasn't exactly going crazy.
No. I mean, not till the final 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think actually Adesanya may in fact just be kind of harder to straight up run over. Like Whittaker, I think has.
But yeah, I mean Whittaker is sort of stylistically much more vulnerable to just being hit by raw low kicks.
Absolutely, yeah. There's an easier entry right there off the bat, and Cannonier did do a great job of landing those kicks early on, even as he was just getting his face busted up with jabs. Who has Adesanya even faced that is a serious kicker other than Blachowicz? Who has so much else fundamentally sound to back up that kind of range weapon. And also, by the way, tremendous kick defense, which I will continue arguing till the day I die, was really like the decisive factor in that fight. That Blachowicz, you just can't pick him apart with kicks.
Yep.
Cannonier doesn't have great kick defense. He just has really powerful kicks. So, yeah. I mean, I will say, I guess that there's, I don't know, maybe some intrigue in what happened. There isn't, though. I mean, I think Adesanya can check kicks if he must, but I think more often than not, he's just going to get out of the way.
Yeah.
He's just going to stay too far away to kick, and he's going to pull the leg back when Cannonier goes for it, and maybe every 10 times that happens, he'll blast him with a kick in return, or hit him with a jab, and yeah, it's just not a very intriguing fight. I mean, obviously there's some built-in interest in the possibility of Cannonier making something crazy happen. He's incredibly strong. I mean, I don't know, maybe he can go in there and replicate Blachowicz' wrestling, even though he's not a particularly good wrestler. He is very powerful.
Yeah, I mean,
that's something.
He's a worse wrestler. Like, I think even with the physical edge, he's a much worse wrestler than, say, Marvin Vettori.
Yeah.
No, I just don't see it happening. He's just got to make a crazy exchange happen, and hurt Adesanya really badly, like he did Whittaker.
Yeah.
Admittedly, Whittaker didn't get unscathed out of that fight. Other than that, it's really hard to see a stylistic route to victory for him.
Yeah, and
people bounce off him, and Adesanya doesn't bounce off people.
Yeah,
that's not what he asks them to do.
Yeah, there's also
he says, "You try and bounce off me. I'm the champion."
There's also the fact that Cannonier didn't emerge from that Whittaker fight unscathed either. Like he is very durable. If we don't get, but it seems just as likely to me that he's the one who gets hurt if we enter some of those exchanges. He just eats a big counter. I mean...
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Adesanya's probably flatly more durable than him.
Yeah, well, I mean, just at least partly just because Adesanya doesn't get out of position. I mean...
Right.
Eric Brunson hurt. Eric Brunson knocked Cannonier down.
Yep. Whitaker knocked him down. Brunson knocked him down. Adesanya maybe not as... I mean, he's probably as powerful as Whitaker and fast and accurate. And, yeah, I mean... So I do think there's a non-insignificant chance we get an Adesanya finish, but I do also think it may come on the heels of a fairly tepid fight where he's just kind of comfortably winning until Cannonier has to gamble.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and this is one where I think Adesanya kind of has to... He has to show out a bit in this one.
He should.
Because it's a fight where everyone's just like, there's no stylistic path to victory for his opponent. It's not like Paulo Costa.
No.
Jared Cannonier doesn't have the body kicks or the body work or the combination punching.
Or the pressure.
Doesn't have anything to make it particularly, that makes it seem like it would be an intriguing style matchup. Adesanya is on a 3-fight run of fairly tepid performances where he lost to Blachowicz, he decisioned Vettori fairly handily without setting the world on fire, and then had a super close fight against Robert Whittaker, which a lot of people thought he lost.
Yeah, now's your in a run that has so much more than we skeptics could have guessed. It really resembles an Anderson Silva championship. Mm-hmm. Now's your time to remind everyone, why we remember Anderson Silva fondly and not as the guy who had that fight with Damian Maia or that fight with Patrick Cote, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Now is the time. You've got it's on the platter. Style on him. You can do it. The thing is, Adesanya could just have a straight up fight with Cannonier, and I'd be very confident in him winning still.
Absolutely.
Just go out there, create
Derek
exchanges.
Brunson had a stand-up fight with Jared Cannonier and put him on his ass until he got tired.
Yes. Go out there, make him exchange, trust in your superior defense and positioning, and just outwork him. You can do that. Mm-hmm. You could definitely do that. You don't have to be afraid of Jared Cannonier. He's Jared Cannonier, for fuck's sake. So that's it. I mean, that is really all there is to say, I think, which is why it is disappointing that this is the main event. I'm still looking forward to it. I'll be happy to watch it, but it seems really quite simple to wrap your head around.
Yep.
Let's take another break then on that note. And when we come back, the man that they are clearly hoping to match up with Adesanya next, if he wins this fight, he'll be 6-1 as an MMA fighter. Alex Pereira is taking on Sean Strickland, bona fide psychopath, and then Pedro Munoz, a.k.a. Chris Moutinho 2.0 versus Sean O'Malley. Both of those after this. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Sean Strickland, Alex Pereira. As I said before, very obvious what's happening here from a matchmaker's point of view. They want Alex Pereira, famous for having beaten Israel Adesanya in kickboxing. There's a ready-made story there. I'm not even being overly cynical and hating on this. I get it. I would do the same thing if I was a matchmaker. You got a narrative built in. You got something to run promos about. And I'm genuinely curious to see Pereira versus Adesanya 2. They haven't fought twice in kickboxing, have they? Just the once.
I thought it's 3. Yeah, I thought they've... Haven't they? Haven't they fought twice?
Maybe.
Yeah, they lost. So Pereira won decision and then knocked him out the second time. After
losing every single moment of the fight.
Yeah.
I'm assuming he decisioned a much younger Adesanya.
It was in 2016, so it wasn't that long ago. It was just a year before their first fight. I mean, their second fight.
Well, there you go. Shows my shitty due diligence. I guess I should watch that one. I don't recall it at all.
I I have vague memories that it wasn't the world's greatest decision.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah,
Again,
there might be a very interesting thing. Yet another reason why I'm fully in favor of making this fight if Pereira does win here, because there might be a very interesting sort of psychological history there for Adesanya that would lend insight into so many of his other performances against certain types of fighter. You know, I'm very curious to see sort of how does Adesanya approach a guy like that the first time around. Second time around, clearly more confident, creates exchanges, dominates him the whole time, and then gets knocked out. And then is that
and then he's like, I'm not doing that again.
Right. Is that just a trauma that Adesanya will carry with him forever? Yeah. Anyway, Pereira versus Strickland. We don't have to talk about how he matches up with Adesanya because he's got to get through Sean Strickland first. And what do you make of it?
So this is pretty funny for one reason is that we were asked in the heavy bag relatively recently, like, who do you think is an unranked fighter that could really trouble ranked opposition? And how high do you think they could go in the UFC? And we were like, yeah, mostly it's going to be hyped prospects. Occasionally it's going to be like a style thing. So, for example, you could take, say, Alex Pereira and Sean Strickland as a relatively powerless striker against someone with massive power.
Mm-hmm.
And this would be like a genuinely compelling style matchup where Pereira might actually win despite having some significant flaws in his MMA game. So this one really kind of puts the rubber to the road of that hypothesis.
Sure.
It feels like a fight that Sean Strickland should win.
Yeah.
You agree?
I agree. It seems like really all the stuff that Adesanya did to Pereira in their second fight, which was namely just the ability to outwork Pereira from range. It definitely seems like Strickland has that. I'm most curious about Strickland has such a janky way of going about that approach, though. Strickland is a guy who we've said countless times relies heavily on his ability to just see things coming because he is constantly putting himself in questionable positions. Let's put it that way.
The underlying note behind all this and any kind of analysis where you're like, well, Pereira doesn't seem to have taken to MMA as well as Israel Adesanya does. He might be vulnerable to the takedowns and so on. All of this is sort of beneath this is humming the sound that is just the fact that Sean Strickland keeps his head in the same place the whole time.
Yep.
And his concessions to defense are typically parrying things.
Leaning straight back.
Yeah. And that Pereira could, and the UFC presumably hopes, absolutely fucking nuke him.
Yeah. Left hook. Just take his head off his shoulders. Yeah, not just keeping his head centered, but leaving that center open. This is another Strickland thing. It's interesting. I've always been really interested in Strickland's approach because it's I don't know, it's just it's got one of those it's got the vibe of one of those self-taught games where he just stuck at this style of fighting so long that he can deal with the vulnerabilities better than people who get coached out of it at an early age. Mm-hmm. And there's always a trade-off. Everything you do in fighting. For Strickland, he squares up. The center line is just wide open. That center line, which is directly below his head, which is super high in the air, looks bad. But the advantage of this is it's really, really easy for him to work his jab in. Because the angle it comes from is almost like the positioning you would use to line up a hook. It is itself, it's super easy. Doesn't even have to step in most of the time to just lance that jab right down his opponent's center line. And he is constantly circling in that direction, setting up that shot. So it's like he creates an even trade kind of scenario where he has to trust in the fact that he's been living in that 50-50 position his entire career and knows all the tells and knows what to look for so he can come out on top. But there's just huge vulnerabilities. It's something that like you start to run into punchers like Pereira, and particularly one with a huge left hook who can literally just chase you as you're sidestepping along that circle, and follow your head as it moves over your feet, and not even have to aim particularly carefully. And it's a style that it's so already wide open to a single mistake bringing the whole structure tumbling down that it seems especially risky against such a high stakes fighter as Pereira. So I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, absolutely Strickland's going to rack up points, but he may still lose rounds. He might just lose the rounds on singular punches. Because
he may just get his head torn off.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like he's never been knocked out. He's an incredibly durable guy, but really he mostly succeeds by being surprisingly difficult to hit. Because of his awareness of what he's open to in that idiosyncratic position he prefers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's very kind of Diaz-esque in that way.
Yeah.
But yes, also Diaz-esque in that he doesn't really hit tremendously hard, and that he's going to be in there with a puncher for quite some time.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the questions is, how crazy is John Strickland versus how stupid is John Strickland? Is John Strickland going to go for takedowns? Because he is a good wrestler. He is a good wrestler and grappler.
And a great grappler, yeah.
It does seem like he should definitely do that. But I don't know how much that's part of his game. He went for takedowns against Uriah Hall, but not until pretty late into the fight. And,
I think maybe around 3 he hurt Uriah and then rushed in and body lock takedown. I recall.
Maybe he got some takedowns on. According to Fight Metric, he got some takedowns on Fort McGee. I know he wrestled Tom Breese a bit.
Yeah.
He really, this is part of his middleweight run, is that he really has just leaned much more into that boxing style.
Mm-hmm. It seems like, why wouldn't you at least sprinkle them in? It seems that way, yes. It's such an obvious way just to make Pereira uncomfortable and give him more to deal with. You always, whenever you're talking about that, you have to consider how does that affect Strickland's gas tank, but you got to assume over 3 rounds he can afford to waste some energy tying up in clinches and just trying for some takedowns. Yeah, I would assume that he will. I don't know. It's such an obvious tactic to go for that obvious in such a way that you have no reason to assume that it won't work. I mean, it's not even like, it's obvious, so Pereira is clearly going to be prepared. I've seen no indications yet that Pereira is superbly well prepared for takedowns. It's not like he's just been getting smashed by every wrestler, every takedown attempt he's faced. He deals with them pretty well, but they don't allow him to land big, heavy punches the whole time.
No. And it's not like he's Israel Adesanya either.
Right.
He's not a natural counter wrestler who's striking off the break and is proving increasingly hard to take down in his fights. He pretty much looks the same.
Yeah,
I think he's showing a lot of willingness to get up, and again, he has a lot of physicality to go with his style. So people get tired and discouraged from grappling with him. But Bruno Silva hit a takedown on him pretty much immediately.
Mm-hmm. And there is a clear break between the phases for him still. He doesn't have that, like you said, that Adesanya, this incredible ability to, very early in his career, create scrambles and then be right back to his comfort zone of striking as soon as he gets out of them. I mean, more often than not, Pereira's the one getting hit on the brakes and being forced back into messy exchanges. I mean, there was the immediate one against Silva, but there's also a super long sequence in round 2 where Silva gets him down, Pereira gets back to his feet, but then Silva's just on him, hitting him, and back in on another takedown attempt almost immediately. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, the problem is that Pereira himself is quite hittable. I mean, he's a good counterpuncher, but he's got a pretty rudimentary set of tools that he tends to look for. It's very Glover Teixeira-esque. You know, overhand right, left hook. It's a great left hook.
Ironically, well, probably not ironically, but yeah.
Why is that
he's
ironic?
been training with for his MMA run, isn't it?
Oh, I think you're right. Yeah, well, that makes sense. Maybe I think we've actually talked about this in regards to Glover's late career boxing improvements. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I'll pick Pereira because it sounds more fun, but I have every reason to think that as long as he isn't winning this fight, he's going to be losing it.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I think he's going to be chasing Strickland around a lot, and I mean that's the thing. He's not he's not a defensive technician like Izzy is in any phase.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess I'll take Strickland. Why not?
Yeah.
Because I think people are going to be surprised at how much Strickland just hits Pereira.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of it, and I think I might be a crazy person, but I don't think he's stupid enough to not try and hit takedowns.
No, he's got to.
And, whilst he has been knocked out, and Pereira certainly can knock him out, hasn't been a middleweight, I don't believe.
No.
I don't believe anyone's finished him at this weight class. They were all welterweights. Did the Pons finish him, or did the Pons just hurt him? But it was ZDS as well.
Yeah, the Pons just hurt him. That's a fight that I will forever say was actually quite close. People remember it as being really dominant, but it was really, really close. The other one where he got badly hurt was against Usman.
Yeah.
Usman.
I mean, those two fights do actually show that John Strickland can be in deep trouble against just an insistent puncher who just comes after him.
Yes.
Don't need to be particularly particularly deep.
No.
So if Pereira just presses forward and comes after him,
I think that
John Strickland is there to be hit.
Yeah, I think that would be the best approach. But much worse to be on the end of Strickland's reach when he's bossing you around.
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm not sure I trust Pereira to... I don't trust Pereira to push forward, and I also don't trust Strickland to hit takedowns. I think this is going to be a mess.
It's a good booking. I do like it.
Yeah, it's very good. Yeah, I'll take Strickland, but it'll be super funny if he just tunes him up, just jabs his face off for 2.5 rounds, and then just gets absolutely flatlined.
Yeah. And I for reasons I can't really explain, still like and find Sean Strickland endearing, and I probably will until the day he finally murders someone. But yeah, he's got it coming. No one could deny that. Even for a career-long fan of his, it'll be satisfying to see him just get knocked out by a huge punch.
I mean, if he wins this, does he get a title shot?
Probably.
There isn't really anyone else, is there?
Yeah, what's to deny him? He's had a tremendously good run at middleweight. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he absolutely should. And I'm honestly quite curious to see him versus Adesanya. I think that's a really interesting, weird matchup. Mm-hmm. No, Adesanya's not fought somebody like Sean Strickland before.
No, that is true.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
He might just kick Sean Strickland's leg off, but...
Yeah, probably. That's what he tends to do. Okay, let's talk then about Pedro Munoz versus Sean O'Malley, or as I think both horribly and yet somewhat accurately pegged him, Super Chris Moutinho. I think we're going to see. I think we're going to see good long stretches of what Sean O'Malley did to Chris Moutinho. That's why I say that. Because Pedro Munoz is going to somewhat slowly come after Sean O'Malley, who is going to skirt around the edge of the octagon and hit him with straight shots and just try to stay away as much as he can. The difference is that Munoz is disgustingly durable, a better striker by far, that he's not just putting together a mess, but and just trying to create horrible, scrappy moments, but will actually put together intelligent combinations, and is a great low kicker. That is a huge difference. That could be a serious problem for Sean O'Malley, given what happened to him in some previous fights. But I do think we're going to see a lot of O'Malley versus Moutinho in stages of this matchup.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this is also the exact same thing as Sean Strickland versus Alex Pereira. Is that it's who is the highest ranked guy we can possibly give to this dude that we want to do very well.
Yeah.
And it unfortunately is Pedro Munoz, because he's tiny and very foot slow, and
he's the best version of a winnable style matchup.
Yeah, he's tiny, very foot slow, and we saw an aging Dominic Cruz run him around the cage.
Yeah. Although, interestingly, I mean, it was really Dominic Cruz coming forward, as has so often been the case in Dominic Cruz's late career period, that was when he was actually giving Munoz more trouble. Mm-hmm. When Munoz was allowed to come forward, he actually seemed quite well prepared to chase after Cruz, to kick his legs, to run him into hooks, etc., etc. So, again, it is a much more advanced version of the sort of incredibly rudimentary don't stop walking forward approach that Chris Moutinho tried. Even that did yield some moments. Not much. But it's not hard to see Pedro Munoz having much more success, even if he didn't have anything more than just those few moments that Moutinho created. He's probably going to have more, because, again, he's going to be trying to work the legs. He's going to be using his jab, something Chris Moutinho has yet to discover.
I mean, Chris Moutinho is perhaps the purest boxcar homer we've seen.
Oh, my God.
Like, durability 100, striking 4, wrestling 4, jiu-jitsu 4.
Grit and determination 100.
200.
Yes. Just nothing but a willingness to walk in and eat absolutely everything Sean O'Malley wants to throw. Yeah. The interesting thing is I don't know if Pedro Munoz really has all that anymore. I don't think he likes taking that much damage anymore. He's taken enough of it, I think he feels. So that may be an interesting thing, is that in being better than Chris Moutinho and having more resources at his disposal, it's possible he could actually be diverted from the winning approach, which is essentially the Chris Moutinho approach, just better. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think Sean O'Malley, it's so easy to hate him, and I hate him. He's awful. I never tire of bringing this up, but the moment that sealed my dislike for this man was when they did like pre-fight packages, little video packages before his fight with Cheeto. Hmm. And and Cheeto was like, oh, my daughter, and et cetera, and hunger, and creating a better life for my family, and all the Cheeto things. Pretty standard, but endearing. It's a ready-made. It's a good backstory, and he believes it. Like this is real to him. And then they cut to Sean O'Malley, and he's like, "Yeah, I always wanted to be famous." That's his motivation compared to this harrowing tale of Cheeto Vera's suffering family. Like, he sucks. But I think people are too ready to write him off because of that. Mm. And honestly, he's a very good fighter. He's just got a natural feel for a certain kind of fight that is very difficult for many MMA fighters to deal with, which is that he can not try to command the center. He can not come forward and can just pick people off with power. He can just crack people from a safe distance and give them no choice but to chase after him. It is essentially the same dynamic that made Lyoto Machida great back in his day and continues to be a tremendously effective sort of base style or skill set for MMA fighters, which is, just like be slick and fast and make the opponent make the mistakes. Don't give them any choice but to make mistakes. He's very good, I hate to say it, but it's true. So I don't know. I mean, yes, can he make O'Malley? Can Munoz make O'Malley more uncomfortable than Moutinho? Do I trust him to do it? Not necessarily. Especially because Aljamain Sterling kind of won that fight against him. Aljamain Sterling kind of outmaneuvered and outboxed him with less power, less speed than Sean O'Malley.
I feel like we have to stop discrediting Aljamain Sterling beating people up on the feet now, because he's had rounds of doing it to now literally everyone.
Sure,
he's fought.
Sure, but it's weird and janky and imprecise in a way that O'Malley's isn't.
It's also like, it's also committed and aggressive in a way that I'm not sure
that's true.
That O'Malley is.
Sterling's more of a dog than O'Malley.
Yeah, I mean that's why the Cruz fight, as you were saying, it was a really interesting one, because you were right. It really was like Cruz like combination punching Munoz and then getting out of there. Because at the beginning, when he was trying to be like, "Oh, I'm Dominic Cruz, you can't hit me," Munoz just kicked his legs out from under him and chased him around the cage. He's foot slow, but he's not that foot slow.
No. He's got the weapons to. Yeah, he's got big sweeping weapons that you can't like jump over. You don't have to be that fast to run a guy who's constantly circling into kicks. And the more he can land those on you, he can leverage that into follow-up strikes. I think the big shot he hit Cruz with that hurt him was a left hook off a low kick.
Yes. It was a left hook as Cruz was trying to, I think, dart sideways along the cage. And there's always the risk that, O'Malley's legs are going to go spinning off into the crowd when he's hit with a low kick.
Yeah, and the scrappiness of Aljamain Sterling was also a super important aspect of his fight, because he had moments of outboxing Munoz, but he also just stepped in and threw combinations in the pocket. I think that is actually an important thing. I don't think Munoz... I think I had it wrong. I was like, I don't know if I trust Munoz to want to soak up that damage, but I think as long as he feels he's bossing you around, then he's happier to do it. If you fight back, like Jose Aldo beat him doing classic Jose Aldo shit. I can't let you run me over, now it's time to dig in and swing with you to teach you a lesson. That works on Pedro. And I don't know, does O'Malley have that? I don't think O'Malley likes scrapping with people. I think he likes...
Oh, I think he likes hitting them and making them look stupid.
Yeah.
I'm going to take Pedro Munoz. I think it's going to be...
Yeah.
I think if he low kicks O'Malley and it works, it'll be super funny.
Yeah. I think I'm with you, actually.
Admittedly, I think the size difference is going to look absolutely comical in this fight.
Yeah.
Pedro Munoz... Unfortunately, I think he probably genuinely should be a flyweight. He'd be a real John Lineker force down there.
Yeah.
He's just too small for this division.
He's 5 inches shorter than O'Malley.
Yep.
Reach difference. Let's see. These are Wikipedia numbers, so don't put too much stock on them. But we've got a 72-inch wingspan for O'Malley, 65 for Pedro Munoz. Yeah. So, again, I think it's a very favorable style matchup in many ways for O'Malley, but I do think the critical question in beating Pedro Munoz is, can you outslick him and then periodically just say, fuck you, I'm going to walk you down and hit you?
Yeah, that's not really what O'Malley likes to do.
Right.
He always likes to be just, when he hits people and then runs back out the way, he does leave his legs there.
Absolutely.
And that was Munoz's primary tactic against Well, both Aldo and, frankly, against Cruz. He was just trying to chase him down a low kick that didn't work at all against Aldo. Works pretty good against Cruz. Until Cruz was just like, right, I'm just going to have to throw with this guy in the pocket.
Yeah. We also haven't even mentioned the possibility of Munoz wrestling.
Yeah, I think he can wrestle. That's the difference, I think, between O'Malley and Cruz, is that I think Munoz can wrestle O'Malley if O'Malley steps forward.
Yes.
And Aljamain Sterling, come to think of it.
Absolutely.
Is that he can hit takedowns on him.
Yeah, it's not that O'Malley doesn't have the ability to meet takedowns in that first layer and scramble like mad, but there's just a lot less risk in saying, oh, I'm just going to shoot. Things go bad, I can shoot. That's much more of an option here than it is against those other guys. So yeah, I think Munoz actually has a very solid shot here, and it is, much as I will begrudgingly defend Sean O'Malley as like a quality range striker, I do also think there's a level of just willingness to fight and to absorb damage that he hasn't really proven to have yet. So should be good. Another good matchup.
He's mostly just been. It's mostly just been like one-way traffic in the fights that he's won.
Yeah.
And when they've gone, he did well against what's his face?
Paiva?
No. I think he was doing well against Paiva, in all honesty.
Yeah.
No, I meant
Almeida?
Almeida, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But he was kicking his ass so easily, and Almeida is so much more vulnerable than even Pedro Munoz.
Oh yeah, and just easier to hurt. I mean,
yeah, and just even more lacking in range weapons.
True.
Just a very unstructured, fighter.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, durability and low kicks will be hugely important for Munoz. The low kicks more than anything.
Yeah. So I got to pick Pedro Munoz. I mean, partially just because, he just looks like he smells really bad.
O'Malley, yeah. My dude smells like stale patchouli.
Mm-hmm.
Not even the good kind. Just smells like an incense that only teenagers buy, and expressly for the purpose of badly covering up the smell of weed.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm taking Pedro Munoz too. I like that. Good booking, good matchup. Solid card, man. Very much looking forward to it, even though the main event will feel like a bit of a letdown in terms of stakes. There are other things on this card to make it more interesting, like the Pereira matchup. And
it's a great mix for a pay-per-view.
Absolutely.
It's got quality, it's got mismatches, it's got like crazy style matchups, and it's got old names that people like.
Yeah.
It's got Jim Miller, Donald Cerrone, Robbie Lawler. It's like it's gonna feel like a journey through MMA, which is what the best cards do.
And as we've said, I just want to reemphasize that the main event is a serious opportunity for Adesanya to, it's a serious chance for a y'all must have forgot moment.
Mm-hmm.
Where I would love to see if we get all these incredible fights of varying types and varying levels of meaning, and then we just get to see Adesanya just nuke Cannonier like a champion. I'd be very happy with that.
Yeah, everyone would go home absolutely thrilled.
100%. All right, well, we'll be back next week to talk more about it. As I said, there's another card coming up immediately after, which is not bad. So we're going to be once again struggling to fit in all of these UFC bouts. That next Fight Night card has Rafael dos Anjos staying at lightweight to take on Rafael Fiziev. Very interesting main event there. We've also got Said Nurmagomedov versus Douglas De Silva, my boy. On that card, we've got... I actually quite like the look of Michael Johnson versus Jamie Malarkey. That sounds awesome. Mm-hmm. I like Marina Moroz, Sijara Eubanks. I like Carl Roberson, Kennedy, and Nzechukwu. There are a lot of good bookings all over that card. So we'll be sprinkling as much of that in next week in addition to our UFC 276 recaps. If you want to hear more from 276 and our look back at Sarukian versus Gamrot, you will have to go to our Patreon to find that, where I will be uploading an episode early this week and also lumping in last week's bonus episode, which just wasn't uploaded. But we still had some interesting things to say about the Cater versus Emmett undercard in review on that. So you're going to get another extra long, jam-packed bonus episode for $3 on our Patreon, patreon.com/heavyhands. At Evil Greg Jackson, that's Phil on Twitter. At Boxing Bush, that's me. And that's it for the show. Until next week, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.